and his companions Foundation for Giftedness and Creativity. I'm Muhammad Dakhil, and it's my great pleasure to be your host for this exciting event and work with all of our amazing speakers and all of you. We have a very packed program split between 3 days, bringing together global, regional, and local thinkers, innovators, creative individuals, industry leaders, and young dreamers to create a dynamic exchange of knowledge and expertise in building a platform that will constitute a leading model for a creative, collective, global thinking platform. In line with Mawhiba's ambitious vision to create a stimulating environment for talent and creativity, empower future leaders, and serve humanity through the values of passion, excellence, creativity, cooperation, and above all, trust. We will now look at something very interesting, ladies and gentlemen. Collective intelligence. It sounds very powerful and gives hope for a better connected world. To know more about it and why we should use collective intelligence, please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Sir Jeff Mulgan. Sir Jeff Mulgan is a professor in the Science and Engineering team at University College London, a former CEO of Nesta, the UK Innovation Foundation, head of policy in the Prime Minister's office, and author of many books, including Big Mind, How Collective Intelligence Can Change the World. Sir Jeff, the stage is yours.
Good morning. I hope this is working. And a big thank you to Mawhiba for inviting me today. When I was about 15, my father said to me, you should always seek out and surround yourself with people cleverer than you. It may not be so good for your ego, but it makes it much more interesting. I feel me being surrounded by people better than me. Mike, do I? And I rather doubt whether I would have qualified to be there rather than here. But I look forward to learning from all of you. Shall I use these mics? Somebody? This seems a little bit erratic, this one. Or, okay. Plan B. Always have a plan B. I spent late last night. I don't know if any of you were watching my country be defeated by France last night in the World Cup. Oh, you're not meant to clap there. But I wanted to say there's a very interesting story lies behind that game. A few decades ago, France decided to become really serious about football. And they set up an academy in a place called Clairefontaine, a little bit like Mawhiba. They scouted for talent, the best 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds from all backgrounds playing football in France. At 13, they put them into an intensive academy to learn how to play, with coaching not just on how to kick the ball or head, but also how to be a team, also how to be fully rounded human beings. And by 1998, they were ready to win the World Cup. At that moment, England's football team was doing terribly. And we tend to be quite arrogant and not very good at learning. But in this case, our heads of football decided to visit Clairefontaine to ask them their secrets, and they gave all their secrets. And we then precisely copied what they had done. Searching for talent, intensive training in an academy, coaching, nurturing the talent. And even though our team didn't win last night, it is much better than it's been for many, many years. And these two teams are signs how if you really invest and support talent, not just individuals, but as teams, nothing can stop you. And I think France will probably win, but who knows? So, let me share some thoughts about collective intelligence, about the frontiers of science. And if this works, I want to begin with a book. If any of you have a long flight in the near future, this is a good book to read. If you don't have time to read it, I will give you the 30-second summary of why it's interesting. It's a book about creativity, but it's also a book which tells of stories in every civilization across the world which have a very similar pattern. In these stories, someone gets a gift. It may be treasure they find. And in the stories, if they pass the gift on to someone else, good things happen. If they hoard the gift, bad things happen. They are punished by fate and destiny. And in this book, Lewis Hyde uses this as a metaphor for any kind of creative gift. You are all, I'm sure you all work very hard. You are very diligent, but you are also recipients of a talent which you have been given, which you did not create. You are lucky. And the message of these myths and fairy tales and stories from all over the world is if you don't pass it on, if you don't give back, you will not in fact flourish in our society. So it's a wonderful book about the virtues of having a gift and giving back, of passing it on, which in a way I think is what this whole event today is about. My own background is a qualification in telecommunications. My PhD is in telecoms. Though as my son points out, I can't actually fix the Wi-Fi in my house. It's a little bit out of date, my knowledge. And then, as the introducer said, I've worked in governments, in national governments, city governments, the European Commission, big bureaucracies like that. I've also tried to be an entrepreneur, setting up organizations of all kinds, usually finding really good entrepreneurs who I could help to make these grow, and then working in between as a funder, running a foundation, and now in a university. And in all of these contexts, I have tried to put together around me diverse teams of people cleverer than me, people who knew more than me, and that's what's, for me, made life fun. I'm always learning something from others. And my one advantage over some of you probably is just the experience of a few decades more of doing that kind of work. And that's what's got me interested in collective intelligence. How do we make the whole more than the sum of its parts? And I'll come on to that in a moment. But first, I want to say something about the frontiers of science. Because one of the gifts we all have is to be living at a time when science is changing with extraordinary speed. This is a little diagram about light, which you can see lights all around us, and we saw some wonderful images last night. This is a pattern of global income, average income, over the last few hundred years. And then this line shows how much light you could buy with an average hour of work. 1,000,000 years ago, not very much. 1,000 years ago, candles, oil lamps. And then we get to gas lights and then electric lights, an amazing breakthrough, the 19th century. But now it's gone exponentially up. We are in an era of extraordinary acceleration in many things, including in light. And you can see the acceleration physically with drones or hyperloops. And my guess, if you ask yourself how many miles or kilometers you travel each year, compared to your parents, your grandparents, you live a life of extreme velocity and acceleration compared to them. And indeed, this is, in a sense, the story of the world as a whole. This diagram sums up our last 200 years. You don't have to look at all of it. I don't know what you can see. As you can see, we are in a time of the great acceleration. There is world population, GDP, urban population, water use, telecommunications, transport, tourism, but also acceleration of not such good things, such as tropical forest loss, carbon dioxide, methane, ocean acidification. And in a way, this is the great question for the generation of the 2020s. How do you combine the acceleration of science and knowledge, but apply it to the negatives, the threats to our survival, the threats to our environment, which we see all around us? This is the intellectual challenge, the moral challenge, the social challenge, which I think we all face together, but particularly those of you gifted with extraordinary talents. Now, we can see many examples of creativity linking scientific knowledge to the big challenges. So I work quite often and walk past every day DeepMind, the artificial intelligence company based in London, owned by Google. They do extraordinary work now trying to mobilize their best brains to work on really serious problems. This is a picture from the cover of Nature last year, maybe this year, I've lost track, of their work creating algorithms which could discover essentially new molecules for drugs, potentially transforming the business of pharmaceuticals, the business of finding new treatments for diseases. And in fact, they have another Nature cover this week, or maybe last week, very unusual for a commercial company to be making such extraordinary breakthroughs in science. And they have a strong moral sense of using that brain power on the problems that matter most. This is another example from an organization I work with in Switzerland, GESDA, which tries to link science and diplomacy. And they produce forecasts of scientific and technological trends over the next 5, 10, 20 years, which you can find online. And this is just one page from what they put out a few weeks ago, alongside, I should say, a project on collective intelligence. Here, they're just looking at the quantum revolution, advanced artificial intelligence, which will transform so much of our lives. Indeed, quantum computing may render the cryptography in your phones, in WhatsApp, in Gmail, may undermine it. So it's a very truly disruptive technology, but also potentially another leap in our capacity to think. And some of this report is also about the extraordinary things happening on brain interfaces, which may be a topic some of you are working on. This was a trial which began a few months ago of brain-computer interfaces to help people with severe paralysis or other conditions where they couldn't maybe control their limbs. This has been talked about for many decades. It was in science fiction, the idea you would put a plug into your brain. But it's taken a little time to come to reality. But it is now moving from science fiction into clinical trials and maybe in a few years' time into things we buy in the shop. A very exciting field of using science to deal with the real health challenges of millions of people across the world. A very different example, also from a few months ago, is geoengineering. Is anyone in this room involved in a big geoengineering project, incidentally? No one putting up their hands, okay. I mean, this is a field of extraordinary potential, but also extraordinary risk. Maybe putting above the earth, floating platforms reflecting the sunlight back to stop global warming, or indeed sprinkling sort of ground glass all over the Arctic again to reflect back the sun's rays. There's huge risks in this, but also huge potential. And this is where some of the most ambitious minds are now working on testing out, researching, thinking through what engineering at truly global scale might look like, but also how we assure ourselves we don't destroy the planet along the way. And then this is a picture, not of your breakfast, though it does look a little bit like some of the breakfast in the hotel, but of what is happening to your breakfast now. These are bacteria in your gut. And one of the things which has, I think, changed in the last 10 years, maybe 20 years, is a completely different way of thinking about us as human beings. realizing that we depend on billions of bacteria in our body, in our stomach, which do so much to keep our bodies functioning. And out of this is coming, in many ways, an entirely new field of medicine, which takes seriously the microbiome, what's happening in your stomach, so you keep it healthy, you feed it, you don't use too many antibiotics, which are very bad for your microbiome. And we're learning this is not just good for physical health, it's actually also very important for mental health. If your bacteria are not happy, you will not be happy, which is a strange idea, I know, but one we can all, in a way, apply to our daily life, our diet, how we bring up our children. Again, the frontiers of science changing, influencing the frontiers of our behavior. Now, I want to say a little bit about creativity and the creative spark, which is a theme which runs through Mahiba. It's not just about science and engineering and technology. It's also about how we mobilize our creative capacities. And I want to start with dreams. Dreams were mentioned earlier. Probably all of you dreamt last night. Some of you may remember your dreams. And one of the really interesting things science has shown in recent years is that often it's easier to solve problems when you are asleep than when you are awake. This is quite surprising. But if you are working on a really difficult problem, sometimes the best thing you can do is go to bed. And you will wake up in the morning and the problem will be solved. Even if you are learning a new skill, like playing the piano, sometimes you can learn more by going to sleep and letting your unconscious brain do the work than if you stay up all night trying to improve what you're doing. Very counterintuitive. And this has an important role in the history of science. This is just one example from the 19th century. This guy on the left was a chemist trying to work out the structure of benzene, the molecule benzene. And he couldn't work it out. And he woke up one morning and he had a dream. And in the dream, the middle picture, he saw a snake eating itself. And suddenly he realized this is how he had to imagine the structure of benzene, and immediately drew the drawing of the snake and then the molecule structure. His unconscious creative brain has solved the problem that his linear logical brain could not. And I think part of the task of anyone involved on the frontiers of science is how you learn to mobilize these other parts of your brain, your spirit, your body, as well as your logical one. And this links to, for me, one of the most interesting things about the history of science is how often in that history things have started through seeing the world in different ways. Nearly 500 years ago, people started using microscopes. The picture on the left is from Robert Hooke, who was one of the pioneers of the microscope, looking at river water, for example, and seeing that it wasn't empty, it was full of little organisms swimming around. And he started drawing these in beautiful drawings. This one is of mold. He was the first person to see a flea and draw it. That's a flea. No one knew what they looked like before then. And out of this came new insights. So Robert Hooke invented the idea of a cell, that our bodies are made up of cells, which is the foundation of modern biology. And that ability to see things in fresh ways is also played a huge part in the history of science with that other picture on the right, which is the famous story of the discovery of penicillin by Alexander Fleming, who had left a petri dish out, and it appeared to have been ruined while he was away for a few days, but he had the intelligence to recognize that what seemed like a problem was instead an insight into a new material that could kill infections. And antibiotics have probably done more for human progress in the last 100 years than almost anything else. And it all began with seeing in a different way, seeing that what looked like a problem was actually a new solution. These three people are another important chapter in the history of science, the people who found DNA, the structure of genetics. The two men got the credit, Crick and Watson. The woman, Rosalind Franklin, didn't get the credit, as often happened in science, but played just as important a role. And part of her role was, again, seeing in new ways. So she was a pioneer of the electron microscope, which was still quite rudimentary in the 1930s. And that's one of her photographs on the left. That gave the idea that perhaps DNA had this double helix structure, which you see on the other side of the picture. And that spark of visualization, of seeing things anew, allowed an entirely new theory of how genes are organized in our bodies and indeed in the whole of nature. An extraordinary breakthrough which began with seeing. So this is why I think it's so important to start by encouraging your eyes to see in fresh ways. Do any of you know what this is a picture of? This is called the Mystic Mountain. And it's a picture from the Hubble telescope, which has gone way out into space and is now taking the most extraordinary photographs of the universe. I am not an astronomer, but I think our galaxy, the whole of our galaxy, would appear as a small dot in this picture. We are learning the incredible vastness of space and just how small we are, but also with beautiful pictures which are on the boundaries of science and art. This one comes from the James Webb telescope. And this is one of my favorite recent pictures. It's the picture of a protein in your body moving a molecule around. And I would never have guessed that's what things look like inside our cells. And we are now in this era where just as we can see the vastness of the cosmos, we can see down to the tiny microscopic details of our body in ways which will generate new insights about what can be done, about how to solve problems. These are the senses in which we are incredibly lucky to live in an era when science is so dynamic. Now, one of the things which any scientist, I hope, learns early is summed up in this slogan in Latin, which some of you may know. Maybe not many people probably speak Latin in this room. This was the slogan of the Royal Society in London, which was probably the first truly modern scientific society, with Isaac Newton and many others working in it. And this slogan, nullius in verba, basically means don't believe anyone's word. It's a very surprising slogan. It's saying the essence of science is skepticism and doubt. Always ask questions, always try to get beneath the surface, always try and do better. And as we heard last night, always keep asking why. And this sort of skepticism, I think, lies at the heart of all healthy creativity and science and technology, always being self-critical, never accepting someone else's word, so don't believe anything I say, or challenge me, but also challenge yourself and your own assumptions. And in a way, this spirit, which was very unusual in the 1660s, is at the heart of the great acceleration I mentioned earlier. Now, the other thing which science depends on is very similar to art. This is a picture from one of my favorite films, made in the 1950s. And the film consists of the painter Pablo Picasso painting on a glass screen. The whole film is him painting. And the reason the film is so compelling to watch, even 70 years later, is that you see him paint a beautiful picture on a corner, and then another picture, and then he goes over it. He ruins it and changes it and does it again and again and again until there is a painting he is satisfied with. And this, in a way, is the heart of the artistic process of constant trying and trying, iteration, improvement, never being satisfied. This is the best film which shows it and shows how creativity is restless in its nature. And you see the same in, I think, all fields of science. I mentioned light earlier. You may know the story of Thomas Edison, who invented the modern electric light bulb, and he tried out 10,000 different materials before he came across the tungsten, which worked, which didn't burn up, which allowed you to have light in a glass bulb. But he had to be incredibly patient and resilient to try again and again and again. And one of the things I would urge all of you involved in any kind of innovation, try and have 100 ideas, 300 ideas, and then discard the 298 which aren't good enough. Don't try and accept your first idea or your fifth idea, your 10th idea. There will nearly always be a better one waiting for you later on. And this, in a way, is the spirit of laboratories. On the left is a picture from 600 BC, one of the first laboratories from Pythagoras, the great mathematical genius. And this idea of trying things out, testing, having a control group, underpins all of modern science. I live near this institution in England, which has a very interesting story in this relation. It's called Rothamsted. In the 1840s, food harvests were declining all over the world, certainly all over Europe and North America. And there were predictions of starvation as the population was going up and food yields were going down. And this man called John Laws created one of the world's first modern research labs where he tested different crops and different fertilizers in a classic laboratory way, dividing fields up into little sections, each with a different mix of crop and fertilizer. And out of this developed many of the modern nitrogen fertilizers, which then turned food yields upwards and mean that now we're in a world of 8 billion people with enough food. It may not be well distributed, but we have enough food. And it was applying the scientific method, creativity, but also rigor in trying many, many things again and again, which got to success. And in a way, that's an example of where science interacts with the real world. I don't know if any of you read biographies of Albert Einstein. He sometimes taught to us as if he was a lone scientist sitting in his study thinking great thoughts. But that's very misleading. He had a job. He worked in the patent office in Switzerland where he lived. And he kept seeing all these proposals coming in, often for new kinds of clock or time device. And it was that interaction with the working world, the real world innovators of his time, which sparked him to think of the theory of relativity. And nearly all the theoretical breakthroughs are often encouraged by some engagement with the real world. There's a wonderful book on the history of 20th century science by one of my colleagues at University College London, John Agar, which tells us in almost every field, physics, biology, chemistry, this interaction with the working world is what sparks the big breakthroughs. And creativity can be useful in much more practical ways. This is one I love from road planning, where this looks like a sort of beautiful mural on the road, but actually it was put there partly to change the traffic behavior. If you're driving over something like this, you drive much more carefully, it turns out. So this integration of art into urban design is beginning to transform even fairly basic things like road design. Most of our roads are very boring, have no color, no creativity. But actually a little bit of art can truly transform them. And right on the frontiers is this extraordinary interaction of art and genetics, which companies like GeneArt exemplify. And the CRISPR-Cas9 devices for gene editing, which you can now buy on the internet, which is beginning to allow us to treat genetics as almost an art form where you can design, if you want a pet with luminous fur, you can actually design it. Very dangerous, but also a very exciting fusion of art and science. Now I want to come on to the theme of today, collective intelligence, which I've become more and more obsessed with as my life goes on and I see different kinds of behaviors around the world. And this little film of fish, in a way, sums up what we're talking about. Here you see many small fish collaborating together to avoid being eaten by bigger fish. And the fish are really quite stupid. But by working together, they protect each other. And all over nature, we see examples like this, where insects or animals or birds or fish learn how to coordinate and cooperate to survive. And for me, the great question for humanity, with our much bigger brains, is whether we can learn some lessons about how to do that. Now, science has always been a collective enterprise. This is a picture from NASA in Houston at the time of the first moon landing, all men, incidentally. And at that time, 500,000 people were employed in the NASA program, an enormous project of collective organization, but very traditional methods, very hierarchical. And what's interesting is how we're moving, in some ways, in a different direction. This diagram shows how many authors there were in science journal articles over the last 60 years. And it's an extraordinary diagram if you look at it closely. At the bottom, you will see the 2 lines showing the number of papers which had between 100 and 1,000 authors, that's that line. And then this line is more than 1,000 authors of a single article. Science is becoming dramatically more collective. The size of teams far bigger. And this is very important because if you're a scientist, it means you have to learn how to work with others. You have to learn how to mobilize teams of 12, 100, 1,000 collaborators. So collective intelligence is not a nice-to-have add-on. It's at the core of what you do. And this was very clear in the pandemic. Last year, 8% of all global research was linked to COVID-19. And if you see that diagram there, that just was a map in 2020 of the international cooperation which was happening around vaccines, around treatments, around new kinds of testing. An extraordinary global collective intelligence gave us things like the Pfizer vaccine or the Gavi program, which funded distribution globally. And these are examples of this emerging field of collective intelligence, maybe most visible in examples like Wikipedia, where millions of people contribute articles to an encyclopedia, rather than depending on a small team to write the encyclopedia, or Waze on the right, owned by Google, which links together data, artificial intelligence, but also drivers, the citizens uploading their own travel experience to make a smarter system of intelligence. Now, this field has become quite hot in parts of science. This is an example from one of many competitions which NASA ran in the US, where they would hide a red ball randomly anywhere in the US, and then challenge teams, a little bit like what's happening here, to find the red balls, but mainly to come up with a method of mobilizing collective intelligence to find the balls, because the US is a very big country. And this is one of the winning designs from MIT, where I used to be, which mobilized incentive structures and networks to find the red balloons. And almost every time they were found within a few hours by mobilizing the crowd, the intelligence of the crowd, to find the balloons. This is an example from health. A woman who was dissatisfied with what the medical community was doing for people like her with problems with her pancreas, And so she created a collective intelligence solution with hundreds of other patients where they shared data and designed the monitors together. And there are many, many examples in healthcare now of collective intelligence in practice. For the world of science, probably the best example is this one, Zooniverse. You can go online and join it. It has over 1 million contributors now, where people all over the world look at data from finding new stars, understanding the moon, through to counting penguins in the Antarctic, complementing the work of professional scientists with the intelligence of millions of people around the world. And for me, this kind of model is part of our future, how we mobilize human brain power at scale alongside the machines. And this is one of the more economically successful ones, Patients Like Me, which had the idea of linking together patients who shared a common health condition to join together, a little bit like the example I gave before, to share data, to find solutions, and sometimes commission research together to find solutions. And they now work closely with the pharmaceutical companies and work on things like epilepsy, fibromyalgia, and others. An extraordinary, again, kind of organization which couldn't have existed 20 years ago, but is about a platform, about networks, about finding solutions. And this is one invented in London 2 years ago, Zoe, which did the same for COVID symptoms. And they got 4 million people to upload their symptoms, sneezing, headache, cough, sore throat, and they got a more detailed picture of the changing variants of COVID-19 than the official health systems, because they had far more inputs of data than the hospitals on their own. So I hope this gives you a bit of a flavor of collective intelligence in practice. Now, enormous amounts of money are going into artificial intelligence at the moment. And I'm quite involved in some of those, as are many of you. But I think it's crucial to understand that most of our problems need combinations of AI and CI. And this diagram just summarizes what both are good at. The AI is very fast, very consistent, can interpret high-dimensional data, is good at learning, doesn't have, well, can have biases, but doesn't inherently. But it's not very good at ethics, not very good at emotional intelligence, it's not as flexible as we are, it's not very good at context, and it's not actually curious. So this is why I think many of our big breakthroughs in the next 10 or 20 years will be combinations of CI and AI. I'm going to share a couple of examples which I hope bring this alive. This one is from East Africa. It's a platform called We Farm, where over 1 million farmers are linked together on a shared platform. So if a farmer is having a problem with their crops, they can send an SMS to a local We Farm number. We Farm then uses AI to find someone else in the community with a good solution, and then they send back via SMS to the farmer a possible answer to their crop problem. Incredibly simple in its way, but very rare. We don't have anything like this in my country for teachers or police officers or tax collectors, and it's sort of obvious this is the future. This is how you turn those 1 million farmers into a collective intelligence, a shared brain, and you allow them to solve their problems more quickly. This is a very different example, but again on the frontiers of science, called MetaSub, which is about the metagenomics of subways. And the idea here was created by some quite young researchers with almost no money, who started creating pathomaps. They would go on the New York subway and see what essentially diseases were present on the rails or the handles. They found various examples of Black Death on the New York subway. In fact, once you look at these maps, you never want to go on the subway again. And then they linked up, this is an example of their sort of diagrams on metal stairways and plastic phones mapping all the diseases present, and then they link this up globally in a network with other cities to create, again, a shared brain, a shared observation platform of what's happening to new diseases, and sometimes antibiotic-resistant diseases, which could be very threatening to all of us. This started as a very small project, quite young students, and now is part of our global fabric of collective intelligence. It's an example of the power of platforms, which is what Mahwiba is. So let me say a little bit about platforms. I think what they're all trying to do is to find talent wherever it is, to connect it into teams, and then direct that talent to the most important tasks and problems. And we now have good examples to learn from. This is another from NASA. So back in the 60s, NASA had all these rocket scientists it employed. It still does. But now it uses collective intelligence methods to solve many of its problems. So these are just a few of the programs NASA has for developing new software, or spacesuits, or even corporate videos. They ask anyone in the world to provide solutions, and then they give them cash awards. You might be able to see there, this is the length of time of the program, the awards, products, and who is allowed to compete. So in a way, they've turned themselves inside out, trying to find the best intelligence wherever it is, rather than believing they have to employ it in-house. We get the same in governments. Many governments have platforms like the one at the top, which is the US challenge.gov. Again, government posts a challenge. Anyone can offer solutions. And Challenge Works at the bottom is one I set up, run by my former organization, Nesta, which works all over the world in the same way, posting challenges for everything from antibiotic tests to treatments for paralysis, and anyone can offer a solution. This is the way the world is going, towards collective intelligence mobilization. And this, I think, is changing how business interacts with science. This was probably the world's most innovative business 60 years ago. Bell Labs in New Jersey, which invented the fiber optic cable, the semiconductor, an extraordinary concentration of brain power. But look at them. This feels like a different era, and it was a different era. And in a way, what we're moving away from is this kind of very traditional hierarchical organization to much more fluid ways of using imagination, whether it's SpaceX on getting into space, or the TikTok algorithm, which lies at the heart of TikTok. And some of these are helped by these platforms which systematically try to tap into creativity. Innocentive did this for engineering. Again, cash rewards for solving problems for companies. Wazoku actually bought them up, is the new version of that. Again, helping big businesses find solutions by mobilizing a community of innovators all over the world and giving them rewards. And this is an exciting sort of direction of travel, which then links to what's happening in the startup world. In some ways, Y Combinator, which you see here, is the modern equivalent of the picture of Bell Labs from the 1960s. Y Combinator trains up startups in digital technologies, in cohorts, gives them intensive coaching and support, tries to get them investment, and has had a huge impact globally and been copied all over the world as a very different model of harnessing often much younger creativity and talent and turning technology ideas quickly into new business models. So I want to end by saying how this links to our needs and our priorities. In the past, you could have innovations which were obviously useful. There used to be a saying, if you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door. And that's a mousetrap there. And if you have a lot of mice, a mousetrap is useful. The other picture, though, is of a a sort of spacesuit. If we had been meeting in the 1940s, it was assumed that by now everyone would have one of these things and would fly around cities like this. It turned out that wasn't very useful. Maybe a few of you have one at home, but it's one of the innovations which didn't turn out to be very useful or needed, and a little bit dangerous too. So one of the things I've become more and more interested in is how we ensure the best brains are working on the most important challenges. Now, all over the world, a lot of brain power goes into the military. Things like drones, which can fire missiles in the Ukraine war, and some of that is necessary. But I think we often have an imbalance between that and our innovation around things like solving social problems, loneliness, poverty, drug addiction, or waste. And one of the things we need to do is reorient our brain power to where it matters. This, for me, is a good example, quite a bold example, I'm afraid also from Elon Musk. When the state of South Australia had power outages a few years ago, they did a deal with Elon Musk to build a huge battery which would provide backup power in case demand exceeded supply. And he said, only pay me if it works. And it did work. And this is where I think brain power is sort of solving a really present social need. But too often, our intelligence isn't working on the most important things. A man called Jeff Hammerbacher, who was the chief data officer at Facebook, said the best brains of my generation are working on click-through advertising, not solving the world's problems. So one of the things I've been working on recently is how do we better align brain power, science, technology to the SDGs. And I'm going to show quite a lot of data slides, so apologies for that. This is one from Elsevier, the biggest science publisher in the world, just showing the patterns of research in all the key SDGs. Health is not on the chart, and where there are missing gaps. And if you're interested in the detail, in October, we published a big global analysis on steering research and innovation for global goals, which was launched with the United Nations. And this has very detailed analysis, country by country, on what are their SDG priorities, where is their research and technology going, and where are the gaps? Where could we be reorienting effort? And this is sparked by things like in health, where 20 years ago, nearly all pharmaceutical development was for repeat conditions in the rich north, not for the big problems of the global south, like malaria and TB and so on. Or the artificial intelligence world, which was devoting all its energy to click-through advertising, again, not to addressing poverty and so on. So if you're interested, look at this data, see where your field of science fits in this story. And I probably haven't got time to go through these now, but I've been looking at net zero technology development, which is an extraordinary field at the moment, growing all over the world. The pace of growth fastest in China now at the top, followed by the USA. And we can use data in ways we couldn't before to look at the patterns. So for example, this is China's top 20 topic clusters. China investing hugely in things like lithium alloys, new batteries, solar cells, as well as wind power, microbial fuel cells, and so on. This is the pattern for the US, which is beginning to fall behind, only really way ahead on magnetoplasma. The point I'm trying to make, and this is the sort of looking at the closeness to market of innovation in these different fields. The point I'm trying to make to all of you, the talented innovators, is you can now situate yourself using data in this global landscape of data about science, data about innovation, in ways which were not possible 10 or 20 years ago. You can see where the cutting edge is. You can see where the growing work is. And through diagrams like this, you can see what is still basic scientific research, the dark blue lines, and what is becoming applied research, becoming applied engineering, applied technology. And I hope, too, you can see where the SDGs are, which most need your brain power to help. And this is really my final point. For a generation gifted with living at a time of extraordinary scientific progress, gifted with extraordinary talent, how do you give back? We are surrounded by so many challenges. India this year had temperatures in the 60s. Climate change appears to be accelerating, causing huge damage in many countries. Pakistan, enormous floods this year. We have still lots of financial instability. Much of the world hasn't recovered from the financial crash of 15 years ago. We have war. This is a picture from Ukraine, a reminder, if we needed it, that many people are living with the pain of war this winter in Ukraine, with no electricity, temperatures 10, 20 below freezing, and huge problems across the world on mental health and thriving. And these are the things which need brain power directed to them. Hopefully inspired by the fact we can see things as never before at the cosmic scale, like this picture of outer space, another one from the Hubble telescope. I just love their pictures. But also, as I said, this ability to see deep inside our own body. This is a human white blood cell chasing a bacteria. Now, I could never have imagined that. No scientist could imagine that we could see these sort of processes which were imagined, but now see with our own eyes. Now, where this comes together, I think, is it partly where you direct your energies. So I'm just going to give two examples. This is one which influenced me a lot just before the pandemic, when the World Happiness Report came out. And this report ranks countries by how happy they are. Sadly, mine is not in the top 10. And it turned out the best predictor of a country's happiness is answers to the question you can see on the left. If you were in trouble, do you have relatives or friends you can count on to help you whenever you need them? And this explained more than GDP, more than life expectancy, more than education. And in a way, this everyday human mutual support is at the heart of how our societies thrive, our families thrive, our communities thrive. Yet it's never talked about in relation to innovation, science, and technology. And I think we need your generation to be attending to this kind of issue, as well as to perhaps the more traditional ones of nanotechnology or new spacecraft. We often have missed out the everyday human things which really matter to us and directing brain power to them. And then, because we ate beef last night, I'm going to show this picture. I love cows. The world has 1.6 billion cows. Methane is 82 times more contributing to global warming than carbon. And you know where the methane comes from, I'm sure. So a little challenge for all of you is, how do you trap that? Do we get rid of all the cows, or do we come up with very clever ways to trap that methane? That's the kind of very tangible challenge the world has to solve in the next few years. So finally, very finally, a time of dramatic advances in science. We are incredibly privileged to have that gift. Individual genius matters, but science and tech are ever more team sports. Thousands of people writing science papers. And so my encouragement to you and Mohiba, direct your talents to the needs that matter most. And if you can, find collaborators, people to work with you, ideally people cleverer than you. And many of you will know this saying, which comes from many places, I think originally from Burkina Faso. If you want to travel fast, go alone. If you want to travel far, go with others. And I have absolutely no doubt that all of you are going to travel far. So thank you very much. I was going to say I thought we had a few minutes for questions, but we may not. It's up to you. Okay, if anyone has a quick disagreement, challenge, question, as I said, nullius in verba, never believe anything anyone says, including me. So I'm very happy to be questioned or challenged. We have a couple of minutes, and often the best progress comes through argument and disagreement, as well as through consensus. So would anyone like to, or tell me where any of my facts are wrong? Any astrophysicists or biologists or energy experts? I can't see any hands up. Ah, we do. Okay, fantastic.
Okay. So thank you for your amazing speech. You have mentioned the importance of social innovation, about focusing on the social issues, solving main challenges that the societies and communities are facing. But why we don't see the big countries like the US, UK, China, why do the main institutes, why do they not go and focus on these problems? The great solutions for the social problems are coming from Africa, are coming from growing economies. So if it's so important, why we don't see a real and serious direction from the main countries?
So I think that's a very wise comment. And let me really agree with you and use the internet as an example. The internet was originally invented in the US by DARPA in the 1960s, the World Wide Web in Switzerland by CERN. And in the 90s and 2000s and 2010s, the internet changed all of our lives. How we shop, how we eat, how we travel, how we bank. And huge amounts of money went into R&D on the internet, mainly on advertising, because Google and Facebook were advertising financed. I showed you that slide on mutual support. So I wonder if you can guess what happened in America to people's answers to this question, whether they could count on other people to help them in a crisis during the first 20 years of the internet. And the answer is it fell sharply. Or rather, the numbers who had no one to count on went up, I think, from 8% in about 1990 to 25% in the mid-2000s. So there was a huge decline of social capital, of mutual support in the US in the era of the internet, but no R&D, no tech development, no social innovation around that until much, much later, till the problems on childhood and misinformation became clear. And I think the reason is the countries which were so strong in science and tech in the 20th century, like the US, like the big countries of Europe, including mine, they are stuck in a bit of an old mindset where technology is only about hardware. And they missed out the social dimension and so made big mistakes around the internet. And I think other parts of the world will be smarter now. As you say, Africa, Asia, the Middle East. I hope you don't repeat that error of believing innovation is only about physical hardware. It matters. I'm in an engineering department. I love tech stuff. But it's a very old-fashioned view to believe that that's all that matters and that social innovation isn't as important to actually thriving in the world. So thank you for your question.
All right, sure. Thank you, Sir Jeff, for a great informative presentation. Brain power, really. And they say alone we are smart, but together we are brilliant. It made so much sense after listening to Sir Jeff. To dive more into the collective intelligence in the new future, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome onto the stage the moderator of our first panel discussion, Mr. Familusi Babajid, known as the Fabulous Executive Director, Africa at Under 40 CEOs. Welcome to the stage. I pass the mic to you, Mr. Familusi. Oh, you're here.
Thank you so very much. It's good to be back at the second edition of Moeba's Global Conference on Giftedness and Creativity. And my name is Familusi Babajide, but you may call me Fab. Fabulous is just perfect. American author and business consultant Ken Blanchard said, "None of us is as smart as all of us." This statement lends credence to the idea of collective or group intelligence. Collective intelligence is a term that first appeared in sociology in the mid-1980s in the study of the process of collective decision-making. Researchers defined collective intelligence as the ability of a group to find solutions to problems more effectively than the best individual solution in that group. In this respect, the collective intelligence surpasses the intelligence of any individual in that group. Collective intelligence can cover consensus, social capital, and concepts such as electoral systems, social media, and other methods of accounting for public intellectual activity. Collective intelligence, or CI, is shared intelligence that emerges from collaboration, collective efforts, and competition of many individuals. The term appears in sociobiology, as I mentioned, and of course in context of mass peer review and crowdsourcing applications. There are various theories about what our future looks like. The future of work. Will this be influenced by technological, generational, or social shifts? The future of technology. Will it be driven by linear technological innovation or technological determinism? The future of education. The future of the world and mankind. The future of management. How about the future of talent and their evolution? What will this look like? How, where, and with what tools will they be groomed? How will they be applied effectively? How will they be managed? Will these be inclusive or exclusive? How easily will they be discovered? How important is the role of talented people in solving the global problems, including poverty, water pollution, catastrophic pandemics, climate change, food insecurity, and more? This distinguished panel will be speaking to the need for collective intelligence in the new future. So, ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome to join this panel our keynote speaker for today, Sir Jeff Mulgan. Also the President, European Council for High Ability, Dr. Leanne Hugavin. A transformational leader and foresight business analytics expert, Dr. Arif Ansari. The adjunct senior lecturer in the School of Educational Psychology and Counseling at Monash University, Dr. Leonie Kronbaum. Thank you very much, distinguished panelists. You may please grab your mics. Thank you. All right, I'd like to start with you, Dr. Leon. So you teach identification, support, and counseling of talent. And I'm positive that you have cracked the code in these areas so far. So what are your most interesting findings on talent identification and support till date? And secondly, how may we apply these findings within the framework of a global talent platform?
Thank you for your question. And indeed, one of my activities is teaching, identification, support and counseling of talents. I'm afraid the code isn't cracked yet, but we are working on it. One of the things that has struck me most in teaching teachers, but also psychologists, is that I'm sure they all want the best for all their students, including those with the highest abilities. What lacks is knowledge about how talents can express themselves. So if you don't see them, you don't know what to do. So many times, teachers, psychologists see different things. They see, for example, behavioral problems. And I really loved when Sir Jeff mentioned, see it in a different way. Was that the exact words? I'm not sure. Seeing things in a new way.
In new ways.
Seeing things in a new way. And I think that is very important. And I think that is what we try to teach them. See things in a new way and interpret them in a new way. And when teachers, psychologists can see that, for example, behavioral problems are caused by a lack of challenge, they see their students in a different way and they will act in a different way. So I think that's the start. Of course, it's not the end, but the start is seeing it, identifying it, recognizing it, and then the next step is supporting it.
Okay, supporting it. Dr. Arif.
Yes.
Let's talk about leveraging now. So there's support and then there's leveraging. So leveraging available data. Why is collective intelligence important? And in what ways can it improve an organization?
Oh, wonderful question. First of all, I want to give thanks to all of them. I feel like a kid in a candy store with a lot of, bright brains. I want to thank Dr. Saud Matami, and I want to thank Prince Faisal, Dr. Amal. From yesterday, I'm really excited, and Dr. Uma. So it's really exciting to be here, as the question you asked, When I'm collecting data. Data is very important. Data is the new oil, right, which drives everything. And companies have started seeing new things which they've never seen before. And leveraging them is important. One way to look at it is, hey, what do I see? The another question to ask is what I don't see, right? And the third thing is, what can I bring in? Just to give a simple example, right? I always used to make fun with my students, right? Hey, there are 3 things which are missing today in the data, in the healthcare. They ask me, what is it? Ho, he, ha. Ho means home data is missing. Is your home healthy? He means what? Health data. We have the Fitbits and all those things. The third one is happiness data. How happy we are. When you look at the other way, it's also called the hazard data. How hazard is your home? So these are the things which companies are looking at it from a new angle and saying, if we can leverage all those things, we can bring new ideas, new innovations into fruition.
Amazing. All right, so I'd like to move on to Sir Jeff. Now, the title of one of your books is Big Mind, How Collective Intelligence Can Change Our World. And it sounds quite fascinating. But tell me, how can collective intelligence be leveraged on the global talent platform, especially?
Well, I've been hugely impressed by the Mohiba team, who I think are much ahead of me in how you systematically find, nurture, grow talent. But for me, it boils down to 2 things. One is a mindset, and I hope I was talking a bit about this, a mindset of always being hungry to find the best intelligence, the best data, the best insight, wherever it is. And it may be in surprising places, it may be from the most junior employee, it may be from your customers, not from the top universities. And then the practical methods of harnessing that, some of which is done through platforms. But there's another side to this which really interests me, which is how you organize meetings to make the most of collective intelligence. I work with one of the pioneers of the study of diversity in meetings, how diversity improves boards and companies and results. but also meeting design which taps into sometimes the introverts who don't want to speak, but maybe the cleverest person in the room, or taps into different mindsets and experiences so that you can see things in novel ways. So my hope is, Mahiba will operationalize this in practical ways to turn our global intelligence into a capacity for solving our pressing problems.
Amazing. So we'll do a deeper dive into that much later, but I'm hungry for insight from Dr. Leone. So what is the value of having talented individuals working together to achieve personal development, developing their own soft skills, including creativity, and of course, achieving innovative and synergized results?
Sorry, I missed part of the first part of the question, but I think it's about what are the benefits for this group
Individuals
of people?
working together.
Okay, so really it's about the psychological benefits for gifted and talented individuals when you do actually provide challenging educational learning opportunities for them. So what we know with gifted students and talented students, if they don't have these educational opportunities, then they're likely to be extremely frustrated. So by actually creating a platform where you can have some of the best minds internationally meet and work and interact together on different problems in different domains, then those individuals are going to be happier and our societies are going to be happier because we're going to benefit from all the learning that they've put in over the decades before they reach engaging with that platform. So I think it's really for the psychological benefit of the individual and for the psychological benefit of the society that a platform like this can be created to provide for the cognitive, the affective, and the economic needs of a society, as well as for the individual.
Great. So I'd like to come to Dr. Leone about this as well. So beyond this obvious high ability of an individual, what role should soft skills play in the search for talent?
What roles should
Soft skills.
soft skills?
Yes.
Very important question. Because when we teach our children from 4 years old, 6 years old, we teach them mathematics, language, but to achieve, they need soft skills. So they are learning soft skills without teaching it directly. But we have a problem with those children with high abilities, because they are able to achieve on a level that we accept without using their soft skills. And we really see problems in children when they grow up, sometimes in secondary school, sometimes in university, that at the moment they need those skills, they don't have them. And they don't understand that, and their environment doesn't understand it because they are so smart. How is it possible that they are unable to manage their time, for example? But if you never did that, you are not able to do that. So it's very, very important to focus on the soft skills, especially on soft skills. And of course, if we are talking collective intelligence, we are talking about soft skills. That was very clear in the keynote we heard. So yes, this is a very important topic.
So Dr. Leone, you mentioned time management as a critical soft skill. But which of these soft skills are most crucial to the development of this talent?
Well, for example, communication, of course, is very important. And maybe I can give an example. In our university, we had enrichment classes for very intelligent children. And we asked them before, what do you like? What do you prefer to do? And almost all of them said to me, I prefer to work alone. I don't like to cooperate. And I could understand them, because what they said is, the others don't understand me, I don't understand them, and the result is always less than it would be if I had done it alone. And I think that is very bad that that is happening. So that's why it is so important that talents meet each other, like here. Because you can feel very alone when people don't see your talent because they are not able to see it. And that means that sometimes those students withdraw and think, I better not show because people don't like it. They don't like me to be like this. And apart from the big achievements that we can have with collective intelligence, I think this is also important for the individual to feel recognized, to recognize him or herself in others. And that can lead to big, great things, I'm sure.
Could I just add to Leanne's response there? It also, with highly gifted students, highly talented students, often they're highly competitive. So by working in groups, they have to learn to listen to each other. They have to learn to empathise with each other. They can learn about different thinking strategies that others are using. And so the whole group can benefit from the various skills and the various approaches that the different students have for working together, that if they're working by themselves, so often they just maintain their individual strategies that they know they're strong on, but they actually don't necessarily learn a range of strategies that can help them understand and negotiate and solve more complex problems. So by working together, they develop their self-esteem, they become less envious of other people, and they learn to understand others much better. So they often get better outcomes by actually developing those affective skills at the same time.
And that was the experience, I'm sorry, that was the experience of the students who were in our groups, that it actually pays off if you work together, and not only in results, but also in feeling among friends, which is as
so they have a sense of belonging to the group that they're actually working in, which is so important.
Yeah, I agree with you because I'm going to go a little bit higher. For the university level students, I said that you have to have three things: learn to communicate, learn to articulate, and finally, if you want to be a leader, learn to crystallize your thoughts. One statement, it should be crystal clear what you're communicating.
Amazing. So still with you, Dr. Arif, I saw you nodding in agreement to most of the things that were being said. But how do you reckon these skills can be passed on within the framework of the Global Talent Platform?
Yeah, wonderful question. You know what I mean? It's a lot of deep thinking is needed. You know, for example, I myself consider myself as an intellectual farmer. I always say I like to plant the seeds in my students' mind and watch it grow. There are many seeds I plant. The two of the important ones are critical thinking and creative thinking. Critical thinking can be taught. Dig deeper and deeper. I used to joke around. What is critical thinking? Indiana Jones. He's an archaeologist. He likes to dig deeper. Creative thinking is Mr. Bond, James Bond. He gets out of the difficult situations in a creative way. But that cannot be taught. It's not easy, but it can be inculcated. So we take problems and try to look at from a different angles, different views. In that way, we can do it. That's what I'm saying. You know, for example, in a global, the talent platform, you have to inspire them. First of all, you have to ask them to ideate themselves. Put questions, you know what I mean? Then inspire them. And then you need to mentor them. You need some people like, Sir Jeff here, who has seen big things, who can come and say, okay, look at this one, you know what I mean? He said that, look at 500 ideas and then, eliminate a lot of them. But how do you eliminate? We need some mentors. Mentors are very, very important, right? What are the pressing problems? All those things can be done. But a lot of deep thought is needed. It's not, I don't think I can solve it in 1 minute, or anybody of us can, give the solution in 1 minute.
All right, so still with you, Dr. Arif. Arif, are there any data-driven insights you can share on
Yeah, definitely.
best global practices?
Yeah, I'll tell you the biggest one, data-driven practice, what Netflix challenge. Netflix, what they did is they were doing the rating of new incoming movies. They thought they did a good job. And then they said, okay, hey, I'm going to give the data to the world. You come up with an algorithm. Overnight, I mean, I should not exaggerate. Within a few days, Netflix algorithm was beaten. And people are coming with new methodologies, new ideas to beat it. And then somebody said, wait a minute, these are like big research groups like AT&T. Then one fine morning, somebody said, wait a minute, why can't I steal the idea from somebody else? They said, okay, let me take 2 models. Now you can see the collective intelligence. And they beat it. Now everybody jumped on it. It created something called ensemble modeling. Ensemble modeling means multiple models built by different people works better. I tell my students, in the data world, the business data particularly is more crazy than you think. It is not uniformly distributed. Different models may work on different things. Different people may see different things. Every problem, if you look deeply, is an elephant problem. One person sees the trunk, one person sees the leg. When you put everything together, it has happened. Now look at this one, Kaggle. Almost every company in the world throwing their data and saying what, hey, try to inspire me, find something unique, or solve this problem using this data. So there's a lot of, data. When I was thinking here, suddenly it stuck to me. Wait a minute, Boeings have 4 engines, all same type. Why can't I have 2 different engines of 2 different types to take advantage of landing and take advantage of what? In-flight. So these are ensemble modeling, new ideas, collective minds. There are a lot of examples like that.
All right, so Jeff, I saw you responding. I get mixed. I'm getting mixed signals on whether or not you agree with what Dr. Arif has said, but I know you're big on data. So could you please just share on those data-driven insights as it relates especially to talent development?
Well, maybe just to go back one step, just a good data example, agreeing with what Dr. Arif said, is London, which about 15 years ago, and New York copied a few months later, opened up all its transport data to anyone to come up with new businesses which could make useful things out of that data. And there are hundreds now, and it's been copied all over the world. But it's one of many, many examples where opening your data to collective intelligence creates more value than hoarding it internally. But can I just make a comment on, I really agreed with what the other panelists said. But I think it's very important to recognize sometimes, if you are an inventor or a researcher, it is good to be on your own. Sometimes the best ideas come in moments of silence, in a walk, have a bath, or as I showed, dreaming, where you probably are on your own in your dreams. And it's important to keep that space for silence for yourself. But you also will need to work in teams if you're going to make anything happen or if you're going to learn. And this matters for all the reasons said, but also for one other. We now have lots of data on who succeeds in careers. And IQ is important, but IQ is not all important. The people who are most successful in almost all walks of life have IQ, but also emotional intelligence, also curiosity, and also resilience, the ability to withstand shocks and setbacks. If you're doing anything new, you will face setbacks, you will have problems. And at that point, you need the internal strength of character to cope with them. But also, ideally, you have a network of mutual support to help you through those difficult times. And just one example of that, I published last week a study I've just done on how countries around the world organized intelligence through the pandemic. Their data, their models, including ensemble models, in fact, tacit knowledge and so on. And I was very struck talking to the global health professionals in the WHO and elsewhere, and they all said the really important thing at the beginning of the pandemic was the informal relationships of trust with others who they could call or email and talk to honestly about what they didn't know, what wasn't working as well as what was. So these networks of trusted mutual support are really important in crises, they're really important for invention, and they're really important for life, because things will go badly as well as going well, however clever you are.
Amazing. So I'm still staying with you, Sir Jeff. Let's move on from talent development to discovery now. So can we attempt to reimagine talent discovery in the new future? What will be different?
I suspect my colleagues are more expert on that, but I think one of the things I'm really interested in is the new technological tools which can spot patterns. And already, well, if we were having this meeting in 10 years' time, there might be sensors reading your faces, showing if you were interested or bored or how you were reacting. We can increasingly track interactions between people. And it may well be that we'll be able to spot at a very early age, maybe under the age of 3, who has the curiosity, the capability, the resilience, and so on. I suspect we are going to have an explosion of data-driven talent recognition, much of which will come from, as I say, these new tools for observing patterns of thought and interaction, as well as using NLP to track speech patterns as captured on mobile phones, and a bit later on, text patterns and so on. Some of this is quite scary. I mean, personally, I'm not sure I'd always love to be in a meeting where I was getting all of that feedback on what everyone was thinking and feeling. But that is the world we are moving into. And it's key to experiment with these new methods, because if you can find, and I think Dr. Arif talks about the undiscovered gems, the talent where you don't expect it, that is even more valuable than finding talent in the places you do expect it.
All right.
However, can I just make a comment?
Yes, please.
In response to that, is that we actually do know that intelligence is still the best predictor for academic achievement within schools. And we can also, there are a number of assessment instruments available to identify early giftedness in young children. So those instruments do actually exist, and often we just don't know about them. But if you actually Google different countries and different gifted programs and different talent development programs around the world, there are a range of ways of looking at identifying your gifted students. We were in the Mahiba meeting yesterday afternoon talking about many of the achievements that you've done over time. And I've spoken to various staff who have been incredibly informed, who are also parents of some gifted students here, as well as being involved in teaching in the programs. But I am still a believer that intelligence does count in schools, and all those other things, curiosity is part of it. And in my research at looking at eminent women, we've seen that resilience and those other characteristics of persistence and what else? Belief in self is really important. So there's a number of affective characteristics related to personality that are important, but intelligence and high ability still count. And that can also apply across different talent domains. And so depending on problems that you're dealing with, people use their talents in different ways. So if you can get a group of people who are talented in different domains working together, you can often resolve problems far better than having a group of people who have the same developed skills in the one talent area. So there's a range of ways of having teamwork and people working together too. So all of these different ideas that people are talking about here on the panel are all valid, and we're all building on them, and we're all experimenting with them and trying to find out what actually exists in the data and in the open science. Journals now have open science, and they're encouraging people to submit their research under open science so people can actually look at the data and use their data in different ways too. So we are trying to move to a time, I think, of more transparency and more sharing of knowledge than what we've had in the past.
All right. So, Dr. Arif, you are someone I would refer to as a tools man, because you're constantly inventing tools. Do you have, or have you commenced the building of a talent discovery tool. How will it work?
Okay, let me first touch on the point. I don't work with young kids, but I work with college kids. But based upon my finding, I want to just give you, if you're going to build a toolbox, what has happened is innovation itself has evolved. There are three types of innovation. There are more, which I know of three, which I call the 3 R's. Rapid innovation, radical innovation, unrelenting innovation. Each of them have different measures. For example, there are people who can think extremely fast. I'm talking about the gifted talents. We need to measure it. The second one is, radical thinking. These are people who I call unicorns, multidimensional thinkers, who have been enabled, who had the opportunity to look at multiple fields, right? Jeff is one of them here. He looked at from so many fields of information, he can digest it. Even if he works in a group, other people's information, he can digest it and make it better. The third one is unrelenting innovation. I call relentless. That is mostly EQ, emotional quotient, grit. Like he gave an example of, the bulb discovery. Who would thought, I don't know, was it 1,000? 1,000 different items. He tried it and tried it and tried it. Thomas Alva Edison, right, if I'm not mistaken. And finally found the tungsten. Those are different things, So at young level, it's different. At grown level, it's different. All these things are, very, very important. So that's my first one. Second question, can you repeat the question again? I just want to add to that.
The talent.
The talent,
discovery
exactly.
tool.
So one of the things which I do is, one of my skill set as I like to take a ill-defined problem. Any problem, I put it 3 ways. Well-defined, semi-defined, ill-defined. Right? And there are 2 more which I came to know of. It's called wicked problems. The wicked problems are solving homelessness, solving drug addictions, right? And some problems are like complex, like NASA's. You want to send somebody out of this galaxy. That's 2 complex problems, So those are different. For a global, this one, we have toolboxes. We have to think about how to measure things, right? How to, look at things. That's a deep dive. That's a deep dive tool. We have to measure how one idea inspires another person to another idea. For example, in my toolbox, which I built, I tell them, I give them ESP. That's a fundamental thought process. Not extrasensory perception. I call it as what? Enable them. By giving something to look at. Spark the imagination. Once you spark the imagination, their neurons fire like crazy and they become prolific. This is just a starting point. At the end of the day, it is them who can do it. We can, do 2 things, which is augment and amplify the talent. So we have to, as I call, we have to put a roadmap. We have to look at what are the things which are there, which are missing. Like a business guy, I'm a business guy, I teach in a business school. So we put everything and see what is there, what is not there. The known knowns, the known, unknowns. The unknown unknowns we don't know. But that is where the collective intelligence comes into play. It may be unknown for me. You may know it and fill in the gaps.
So, we're talking collective intelligence, and a key word that keeps coming to mind is inclusion, right? So, Dr. Leone, right? Twice exceptionality is one of your research interests. How do we work with 2E talent within a talent platform, and how do we make it inclusive enough to accommodate them?
You're right. Actually, my focus is on hidden talents, so not the talents who are here, who are obviously not hidden, which is good, and we can learn from them how they manage to do that. But for some people, it's extremely difficult to be seen as a talent, and one of the groups is the group of twice exceptionals. So people who are very intelligent, but also have a challenge. You can think about ADHD or an autism spectrum disorder, and that makes it extremely difficult. But they do have that talent, and what we have to learn as the environment is how can we see it as exactly twice exceptional and not as a disorder. I know, for example, that there are companies who really like to have people with an autism spectrum disorder because they can focus very well. So what we need is an open mind and not see what is wrong or what is the disorder, but what are the possibilities. Actually, another group, and we don't call them twice exceptional, but in a way they are people who come from a less privileged background, poor people. For example, in my country, the Netherlands, people with a migration background. It's very hard for them to show their talents because their environment is not used to look at that, to focus on that. So I think we lose a lot of talents. I'm very happy that the talents who are here are in the open, but I think there are many more. And for me, I think it could be one of the challenges for you as young talents who were able to show it, to show the world how we can help those other talents that we don't see yet. So what happened in your life that you could do this? Because I'm sure that many of you had that experience in primary school, for example, that you felt like an alien, that people didn't understand you, that maybe they wanted to stop you because they didn't understand you. And in a way, you managed to be where you are now. So maybe it were your teachers, your parents. I'm sure it was your personality too. But I think that is one of our challenges to, for example, the twice exceptional students, to give them a chance also to show their talents.
Could I also say that there may actually be some twice exceptional students who are actually in this talent program at the moment because they've actually found the right domain where they can succeed and achieve. And that's one of the benefits. In our country, you can actually go into science, maths areas and give up some of your histories and verbal domains that some of the students who are twice exceptional with learning disabilities have difficulty with. So we know that there are numerous students in engineering who often are on the twice exceptionality with the autism spectrum disorder, but once they get into engineering, often they've found their niche and they can actually succeed extremely well. So part of it is trying to match up with the gifted strength that those individuals have, and they learn to compensate for the disabilities that they're experiencing. We also know that twice exceptional students have attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, are often students who are also likely to be highly creative. So it's about altering the curriculum and providing independent choice and individual choice about what they want to learn, where those students can often concentrate and succeed in a subject that they're really interested in, but they don't achieve in subjects where they're not interested. So there may be students who are actually in this talent program who've learnt to mask the difficulties that they experience and have learnt to succeed because of the opportunities they've had along the way.
All right. So Jeff, you wanted to contribute?
Yes, I mean, I think it's maybe obvious, but I think any kind of talent is more a verb than a noun. It's like a muscle. If you don't use it, it atrophies. And there was very interesting research published about 3 years ago in the US on this, that by several of the top economists in the US. It's called Lost Einsteins. And they looked at all the people in America who had created patents in the last, I think it was 20 years, about 1 million people. And it showed very clearly that most of them had done well in maths and science, but most had also had parents who had worked in technology, were in an area where there were lots of people fiddling with computers and radios, and the poor kids who did really well in maths were not patent creators because they hadn't had that experience of using their talent and trying things out. And so these economists concluded America was throwing away its greatest value, its greatest resource, because these clever, poor kids weren't getting opportunities to fiddle, to try, to code, to experiment. So any talent program, in a way, its most important task is giving people the opportunity just to use their talents, ideally with others, and then they will work out how best to apply them. But my guess is most countries around the world are still throwing away their most valuable resource, the potential talent of hundreds of millions and millions of kids.
Amazing, amazing. So it's time to talk frameworks. Dr. Arif? All right, so the Global Talent Platform is all about nurturing this talent and having them discovered. What would the framework look like on this platform?
I thought you were going to ask the question. Like Sir Jeff said, you must be dreaming. I was dreaming last night. Something came and told me, what I mean? Hey, if you're going to do, at least lay the initial foundation. Like I say, I like to plant seeds. It came to me, then I thought about it in my dream. I said, it's so dear to everybody here in Mohiba. All the way from the, from the Crown Princes down to, Mohiba. I said, maybe something has to do with deer. So I said, okay, let me coin something for deer. The D stands for dazzle. You have to dazzle. I was dazzled yesterday by the presentation. So you create this vibe, this buzz, which attracts people. Then you discover. The second D. The third D is it helps you to discover more people. You should be discovered as well as people should discover you. The third one is analytics, because I'm an analytics guy. Deep dive. Deep dive on the information by providing. The next one is E, enable them, encourage them. Not just contest, sometimes ask them to come up with the idea when there's no problems. Not just problems, you know what I mean? Then I thought about A, what should A should? Augment them, toolboxes. I tell my students, there are 3 types of people in the world. One is a worker bee, another is a leader bee, another one is a queen bee. Right? The leader bees, the worker bees are sitting and writing the codes without understanding what is the purpose. The leader bees take all these people codes and put it together. The queen bees are the ones who really understand what the code's purpose is, what it's going to do. So you have to provide them, augment them with the toolboxes. Then, most important, amplify the skill set. Just because they're talented doesn't mean what? The scope to work. Amplify. And finally, the R stands for reward them, irrespective of whether the success or not. That's the most important thing. Many of these guys are shy. Many of these people are shy. Sometimes they're sensitive. Like my own son, he cannot take what? Negative criticisms. The next R is, retain them. These are alumni. I heard from, Mohiba, they have so much alumni. So they can become the big brother, big sister, mentors. And finally, this is the most important thing according to me, return them to humanity. So that they can solve, as I said, the wicked problems, the complex problems, the great challenges which humanity is facing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arif, daring us on the GTP. Sir Jeff, what innovative features would you expect to find on the Global Talent Platform?
I'm not sure. And I think one of the things Dr. Omar is very good on, as indeed many things, is trying to find minimum viable products. Don't try and solve everything at once. Find what is the part to solve. And the best way to do that, as you are doing, is co-creating it with the users, with your talented young people. My guess is what they will most want is a platform which gives them stimulation, feeds curiosity, is intellectually alive, which gives a network of people who can be useful and provide support, and maybe some routes into resources, the need to get things done, finance, etc. But in a way, I don't think it's for someone like me to answer that question. I think the creative process is exactly what you're doing here, making the community the creator of its own solutions, and then turning those into not grand plans to solve all the world's problems at once, but some minimum viable products which can be implemented quickly, and then they generate momentum and confidence along the way. So I'm sorry that's a non-answer, but it's a deliberate non-answer to your question.
All right, thank you very much. The MVP must be developed to solve a pressing need. Dr. Leonie, there are millennials and then there are the Gen Zs who are driving the fourth industrial revolution. Considering the role that this group plays, what are the success factors that might be put in place to achieve the objectives of the GTP?
I think it is...
Success factors.
I'm sorry?
The success factors.
I think collaboration is key, and to collaborate, you need to see the benefits of it. So the fact that the young people are here, I think they already believe in that, and they are enthusiastic. And I think that's what you need first. You have to believe in it, and then you will work for it. And as Sir Jeff already said, they have to try and to try again and to try again. And that might be a challenge. Again, if you are used to succeeding at once, I sometimes see that people are not able to try again. If they don't succeed anymore, they think they have reached the limit. And sometimes the environment is saying the same. You're already there. What more do you want? And I hope that people do want more and do try again. And I think that is necessary to change the world, to make it.
All right, Dr. Leanne, you teach identification, but you also teach support and counseling of talent. I'm positive, what are your most interesting findings on talent identification and support till date? And secondly, how may we apply these findings within the framework of the Global Talent Platform?
I think, well, there are differences between countries, but I think that many countries are like mine, and we still don't have a society that encourages the biggest talents. Of course, we say we do, and we say that we want people to succeed and do big things. But especially in education, I think we put boundaries, that we say, okay, this is enough. People feel threatened sometimes by a lot of talent. And I think that is where we have to try to change things, that as a society, we embrace talents, also when they are beyond what we can imagine. I think, and that's why that's one of my activities, to teach the people who are most important in people growing up, educators, psychologists, and a fly is hunting me.
They are trying to be part of the collective intelligence conversation.
Yeah, so I think that's one point to start. That is where I focus on that from the beginning, people are not afraid of talent. To be not afraid, we need knowledge about it, and then we can support it. And that is what I've seen. The people we trained in our trainings, they have a change of mind. They are able to recognize talents. And I was thinking about this. It's interesting. The English word recognize, in Dutch, we have two words for it. One is that you see it. The other is that you really recognize it. Sometimes people see it, but then it stops. But you have to accept it, and then you have to support it. And I've seen dramatic changes in young people when their teachers or their environment had a different look. And not necessarily they have to know everything what they could do. Sometimes I think the most important step is to say to someone, I see your talent, but at this point, I don't know what to do. That's much better than what many teachers do now. Or they don't see it, or they see it and they are so afraid, so they ignore it. And that's the worst you can do.
Okay, Dr. Arif. Thank you, please. You may give her an applause. All right, so Dr. Arif, your team was in a KAUST competition.
Yes.
Where you showed how to enable about 100,000 top talent to become thought influencers,
Yeah.
content creators, and showcases using the viral engineering platform. Now, what was the thought process behind the creation of the platform, and what elements of this platform must be adopted by the proposed GTP that this conference and Mohiba is seeking to co-create?
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful question. So me and my team presented in the KAUST Challenge, shaping the new future, shaping the future of media, and we have placed as a top 15. What happened was, one person came and told me, hey, Professor, I'm sorry, people are talking about virality. Virality is important in the creator economy, which is emerging. And it is subjective, not objective. Can you create an objective score for virality? That was the starting point. We went and looked at all the factors, and then we found out there are 400 variables which potentially contribute towards the virality. So we built, and so we said, okay, we can find virality. The next question was, if we can find virality, can you engineer virality into content? So we said that. That was the starting point. Now we later realized, hey, what we're doing is, I'm giving ESP, as I told earlier. I can enable, spark the imagination, and make them prolific. At the same time, I can help them to monetize. In Saudi Arabia alone, you guys are the highest consumer of content, per day, in the world. And a lot of people have hidden talents, like we said, the talent discovery, different type of talent. They want to create, they want to be on the social media, and they also want to monetize. So what they need is inspiration. So we bring in what is called DIY, daily intelligence for you, anywhere in the world, and give it to you, which inspires you. Now we can make the content, make it better. We spark your imagination by doing what is called a deep dive. You look at different content, oh, this guy did this, this guy did this, this guy did this. So we created what is called storyboard, idea board, and whiteboard. So you can write your ideas and then do it. So this is what we propose to, in Saudi Arabia. If you're going to do new media, it is not long form. It is short form too. It's also what is called byte form. Byte form like TikTok. So that's what we propose to them. I think there are a lot of things are there. As I told you, there are different type of talents. Some talents want to be challenged every day. Some talents want to look at one big problem and, resonate with it, enjoy it. So the different things we can put in the global talent platform. As I told you, what are the needs? Because I am completely out from both of you, because I don't deal with the young kids. I'm dealing with the older kids, in the college level, and they have different needs. For example, they want, hey, professor, what's the value proposition? Should I make this content? I'm having a cold feet. Can you help me with that? So we give all these things. I tell them, hey, this many eyeballs are there. This much potential is there, all using analytics. So that inspires them. So what we do is we create a roadmap of the difficulties they face and try to solve it. There are a lot of opportunities to incorporate a lot of these things in the global talent platform, depending upon the needs. There's one thing for thought leaders, there's one thing for other people. For example, thought leaders. Today, if you want to get hired, all you have to do is write articles in LinkedIn. If you write 5 top articles in LinkedIn, you're hired.
All right, thank you very much. So Jeff, human and machine capabilities working together has the potential to solve the greatest challenges of our time. So why do smart technologies not automatically lead to smart results? And how do we ensure that the global talent platform guarantees the desired results?
Well, the history of the last 200 years is of smart technologies giving advances, but also creating new problems. And sometimes, like the internet, creating lots of big problems. So the starting point of wisdom is just recognizing that. And there's no guarantee that something works technically, will work in human terms for happiness, society, and so on. I think what we have to learn are these new hybrids of technology and people. I don't know if anyone in this room has recently used ChatGPT, which in the last few weeks is being very widely used. It's probably, some of you may have done, quite extraordinary. You maybe tell it to write a plan for a global talent platform. This is an AI which will actually generate a quite plausible answer to your question. Now, it's scary because part of you thinks, oh my goodness, there'll be no room for humans anymore once this becomes freely available to everyone. But another view is this actually helps train us. And it's actually quite useful for people who struggle with communication to put their ideas into a chat GPT, then to see what it produces, and then you get an iteration backwards and forwards between the human and the machine. And in a sense, that's what I think we need to do in everything. You can't design perfectly from the start the answer to your question. How do you guarantee the smart technology leads to smart results? But build in these loops, constant iterative loops. So you see what happens, you make a judgment, you adjust, you pivot, you improve. And I think that is very much the spirit, my understanding of Mohiba, is to do that. Nothing is ever finished. And in a way, perhaps this is the moral, I think, of the 21st century, is we don't want things which are perfect, polished, as it were, monuments. Everything can constantly improve and learn, and the task of the leader, the innovator, the entrepreneur is to never think of their product as a finished product. It's always on the route to being better.
Nothing is ever finished.
Including this session. No.
This session will definitely finish, and as we're coming to an end of this panel session, I would like to, at this point, welcome a few questions from the audience, and just so that we can do this in a very sharp, I see the hands going up already. I want you to follow these rules, right? Once you receive the microphone, you have just about 30, okay, I'll make that 40 seconds or less. Give us your name, where you're from, and what you do, followed by your question and who it is directed to. Thank you very much. So I see a hand over there. I see another, 2, and we'll take a third. From this side of the room, that's 4. And we'll be taking just those 4 questions. Thank you. Thank you very much. So number 1 right here, the microphone. Thank you.
So hi everyone, this is Mr. Al-Wadi'i from Saudi Arabia. Let me just start by welcoming my talented colleagues from all around the world. It's great to have all these great minds in one place, so welcome again. The question is, how can we limit the misuse of collective intelligence? For example, when the private sector or the corporates use the collective intelligence for purely individual interest or just for making more profits, while it should be towards the good of humanity. And
I'm sorry, but we could barely hear you.
Is it clear now?
Much better. Just hold it closer. Thank you.
The question is, how can we limit the misuse of collective intelligence? For example, when it's used by the private sector or by the corporates to just make more profits or for purely individual interests, while it should be towards the good of humanity and for the positive impact.
So why not monetize?
Sorry?
Is that the question?
Yeah.
All right. Dr. Arif?
Okay, so first of all, you need a moral framework, right? The moral framework has gone down and down and down, and people, if you use the word moral framework, people get upset all over the world. People want to be free, but at the same time, if it's not moral, something which is called similar to moral framework we need, number 1. The most important thing is, this brings back my memories of what my mother taught me. My mother taught me 2 things, magnanimity and compassion. It has to be inculcated. If you have magnanimity and compassion, you think beyond the profits. You think beyond, the destruction. You think more about what? Better things. And what my father told me is, always think about leaving the world a better place than what you inherited. If that can be inculcated, a lot of these things will go away. That's my humble answer.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arif. I hope that answers your question. Question number 2.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Do you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm Diaz Uruzaev. I'm from Kazakhstan. So just inspired from our earlier presentation, an observation actually. So non-living things such as, for example, air particles, which have probably no intelligence, they work flawlessly in a very collective way. Like whatever I say, it is delivered to the audience flawlessly, a perfect order. When it comes to the animals, for example, the fish that you were showing, escaping the predator, they work in a very collective way, yet somebody gets caught. And now when it comes to humanity, which is considered to be very intelligent, we see probably more often the failures rather than the success in the collective work. So does the collective and intelligence sound very in a conflict way? Thank you.
So I couldn't hear all of your question, but let me offer what I think might be two answers. I have just with some colleagues, mainly in America, started a new academic journal studying collective intelligence from the physics of matter through insects and fish, all the way to humans and computer science, to see the common patterns all the way through. And I think there are things we can learn even from the insects and the fish, even though some of the fish do get eaten. The fact we are here is an effect of human collective intelligence at scale, but human collective stupidity is almost as common as human collective intelligence. And that's why we need the brains to be directed well. And if I could just offer one comment on the first question, the internet companies pursuing profit were incentivized to target services at children where they would obsessively like or not like or become worried about their peers with very damaging effects. I think on those things government does have a role. You need regulation, you need laws to steer technologies, just as with cars we have road markings, speed limits, rules, so this very powerful technology helps us get from A to B rather than killing each other. And this is true of every technology. There has to be a governance role as well as a role for the innovator.
Thank you very much, Sir Jeff. A third question? Thank you. And the final question is coming from here.
Assalamu alaikum and greetings everyone. My name is Mohammed Sangoura. I'm the head of talent and organization development at NEOM. Allow me to start with this quick statement, which says, the land of the future, where the greatest minds and best talents are empowered to embody pioneering ideas and exceed boundaries in a world inspired by imagination. That's our vision. That's NEOM vision. NEOM today is offering unique, new, and endless world of opportunities. From your experience and wisdom, what advice you would like to give to the greatest minds and best talents stepping from academic into a corporate world? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Leonie?
Yeah. I think the biggest risk of big talents is that they think they are there. And you are at this point because once, apart from very intelligent, you are very curious. And I think it's very important to not lose that curiosity and keep asking why or why not. And I think that's the most important thing. Ask it yourself and ask others. And I think in that way you can come to higher things, greater things. And well, that would be my advice.
I would like to add one statement, because you said you're stepping into the business world. Be humble. Learn to put yourself in other person's shoes, because a lot of great companies have been destroyed by some great minds because of the ego, right? There are a lot of constraints. The most important thing is called the know thys. Know the other person's pain, right? Sometimes what happens is you look only from your point of view, like we are talking about, right? People trying to hook on the kids. Why? Because they want to have lifelong customers. They're trying to increase the lifetime value of the customers, which is complete disaster. It's good for them, it's not good for them. So humble yourself and learn to put yourself in other person's shoes so that you can see better. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
And I would just
Leonie?
like to add that I think the journey is often more important than the outcome, and acting with integrity is really important to try and maintain at all times.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Leonie. So moving on to the last final question for this session. Over here. Oh, okay.
My name is Khalifa Al Suwaidi. I'm the General Secretary of Hamdan Foundation in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, the sister of Mawhiba in the Emirates. During Expo Dubai, we established a new platform for gifted kids. And when I'm saying kids, because we started with them before high school, and we encouraged them to be with us for 10 years in that platform. What we did, we encouraged professors and scientists from across globe to be part of our platform to monitor and supervise individual kids. And I'm so happy to announce that in that platform now, we have 180 gifted students from 45 countries, you name it, from Africa, Asia, Europe, and we were able to tie them with well-known, well-recognized professors in their field. You name it, from MIT, Harvard, Stanford, Oxford, and the list. Surprisingly, I had some time to chat with the professors who are committed to work with them for 10 years. And they said something strange. They said, the new generation of gifted kids are so smart that we already learned some lessons from them. And they wanted to be part of their educational life. Like a young girl from Saudi Arabia here was tied with a professor in Colombia, in the United States. That professor told me that that young lady was able to change the set of mind of the professors about the young scientist Arab in Saudi Arabia. So this is a good way to have good minds together in one platform, working under kind of weekly supervision till they get their university degree. My advice, as I just Sir Jeff said, to the young guys that they should not rush and they need to get the wise from the expert in their field, because science, you cannot jump in it. You need to learn it smoothly to be creative. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir, for that comment. And I think we'll just permit the lady to ask the final question. Thank you very much for that, sir.
Hello, my name is Ibtisam Badris. I'm a professor in the National Laboratory for Nuclear Science in King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology. My question is for Dr. Lian. How can we teach youngers to express their ideas? Sometimes they have really interesting ideas, but they cannot describe it. They cannot express themselves. I think this is a big problem. Even sometimes we see scientists that are leaders, but they cannot express their ideas for others to be interested in and support them. Thank you.
That is a really important question. and I think this is the biggest problem, that what other children learn in primary education, they many times don't learn that because they are stopped at a certain point, so they don't have the possibility to stress their ideas. And I think maybe what this sir told us, maybe they need experts. I once advised that I'm also working as a psychologist to a boy, or to his parents actually, who was in a secondary school, and he was very depressed because he thought he knew it all. And how does your life look if you are 13 years old and you think there's nothing more to learn? And I sent them to a university, to the top scientists, just to show him there is more. And he could help him to develop his thoughts and stress his thoughts, as you say, and learn more. So I think, again, it depends on the environment that you give them the opportunity, and sometimes in strange ways, to give them that opportunity to stress their ideas and not stop at the point where others stop.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lien. And as you did say that nothing is ever finished, but this must finish. And I'd like to throw this question to everyone on the panel, starting with you, Dr. Lien. If you could condense your recommendations for the Global Talent Platform into a 30-second statement, what would it say?
Well, I'm afraid I have to repeat myself with my advice, that I hope you all will keep asking why or why not. Ask it yourself, ask it others. Keep your curiosity, share your curiosity with others. Nothing is ever finished. And I think you have the chance to change this world for the better. So please do.
Thank you. Dr. Arif?
I'm going to take a lead. Nothing is ever finished. This is what I tell my students. Never fall in love with your models. No model is good enough. You can build better models. And most important thing, as I already told you, the DEAR principle. The other important thing is, if you want to really encourage talent to nurture and grow and prosper, you should enable intellectual sparring. It's very difficult for talented kids to intellectually spar. I make them spar with me every day in my classroom. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arif. Dr. Leone.
I guess keeping positive and keeping going with the projects that you're working on, keep building on the successes that you've had previously, and keep an open mind to the possibilities that can be developed with this new program.
Thank you very much, Dr. Leone. So, Jeff?
Well, there's two comments, not to repeat. The first is this generation probably will live to 100, 110, 120. So it's really important to think, looking back then, what will you be proud of? It won't be money and status. It will be having done something useful, something with integrity and with ethics. And it's really important, I think, to inculcate that spirit of thinking far into the future and seeing yourself looking back. And the only other comment echoes what was just said around the last question. I was a very shy young person. I would never have dreamed of getting on a stage like this until I was forced to in my mid-20s. But I would really recommend focusing on communication, learning voice control, learning how to speak to an audience in almost every walk of life. This matters hugely in your own community, but also connecting with other people with talent. So maybe just to encourage that emphasis on communication to be integrated into the platform.
Thank you very much, Sir Jeff. So collective intelligence is a new field that has emerged in the last few years, prompted by a wave of digital technologies that make it possible for organizations and societies to think at large scale. It is clear that CI has to be consciously organized and orchestrated in order to harness its powers. human and machine capabilities working together has the potential to solve the great challenges of our time and far out into the future. Over the years, we have confirmed that to a great extent, smart technologies do not automatically lead to smart results. From the session, we're now sure than ever before that collective intelligence can guide corporations, governments, universities, and societies to make the most of talent, leveraging digital technologies. We know that there are differences between environments that stimulate and those that blunt it. We know that human and machine intelligence can solve challenges in business, climate change, democracy, and public health. We know that for that to happen, we'll need to radically change our way of thinking, change our professions, institutions, ways of thinking. We know that collective intelligence will help us survive and thrive, and our panelists have contributed in no small way to how best to leverage CI in the new future. I would like to especially thank our panelists for a great session. Please do give them a warm applause as they make their way back to their seats. Thank you very much. All right, I'm sure the Ideathon participants can't wait to get sparring again, right? Intellectual sparring this time. However, you would definitely have to wait about an hour to do that as we get to Ideathons 2, 3, and 4, where we'll be tackling talent empowerment, collective intelligence development, and platform business model. We're looking forward to welcoming you back to stimulating conversations starting from 10:30 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you very much. God bless.
Fab. Thank you and your esteemed panelists for your engagement and very insightful views. This session had much food for thought. Speaking of which, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to take a 1-hour break for lunch. We'll be back at 1:30 for the Ideathon Session 2, Talent Empowerment. I look forward to welcoming you tomorrow, so I encourage you to keep up the enthusiasm and encouragement we have created today. Enjoy your meal. Thank you so much.